Okay, so hi everyone. My name's Caroline Woodcock, and with me today is Mel Goodban, and we are your moderators for this session. And I just want to start by saying a massive welcome to everybody. This event, Children and Young People, the often forgotten victims of domestic abuse, is part of 16 days of action to end gender-based violence. Kent Integrated Domestic Abuse Service, also known as KIDAS, have 16 events running between now and the 10th of December to inform, educate and inspire action so that we can make domestic abuse everybody's business. Because domestic abuse is everybody's business, and together we can make a difference, which is just what you're doing by attending today. So thank you. Tina will be speaking for 30 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes for questions. I just want to note that your email confirmations show the webinar as slightly longer, and all that is so we don't get cut off. During the event, you're able to use the Q&A text box on your screen to ask questions for Tina. Mel will publish these and ask them at the end of the session. You can use the thumbs up just underneath a question to upvote it. So if you see something and you think, oh, I was going to ask that, give it the thumbs up. If you'd like to follow up on a question, please start the question with the words follow up. So that just leaves me with the wonderful job of introducing Tina Pearmine. Tina facilitates numerous programs to those who have experienced domestic abuse, focusing on regaining ownership of their life and recovery. Tina has a wealth of experience working with children. Her background is working with looked after children and children with social emotional difficulties. This has led her to training and facilitate ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences, the Children's Freedom Programme and the Domestic Abuse Youth Programme. So, Tina, over to you.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Caroline. So before we start our session, I would just like to ask you to reflect on this true or false question. An abusive parent can have an impact even before a baby is born. So just take a moment to look at this, and we'll reflect on this later on in the session. So welcome to this live webinar on children and young people, the often forgotten victims of domestic abuse. It's really pleased to see that so many people have logged on to this session, which has made me slightly nervous. I'm, not afraid to admit that. And here's some housekeeping that you may find helpful. And as Caroline said, there's going to be a question and answer panel at the end of the session. So the effects of domestic abuse in children and young adults is normally covered in a half and full or full day training requirement. But in this webinar, I have attempted to pack so much in, and the objectives for this webinar are to look at and consider the effects of domestic abuse on children and young people, and how to recognise children's responses to the trauma of witnessing domestic abuse, and to consider how individuals and organisations can support children and young people affected by domestic abuse, and also to outline the support available to children and young people and families. You may find some of the content discussed in this session may bring to your mind your own difficult experiences, or to those that you may have be supporting, like children or families that you have worked in. A technique that we use with our clients as well, and in the programs that I facilitate, is that if you feel like it's a trigger or you're being traumatized, something that you can do is alternatively tap one hand or after another onto like your knees, for example, and this can prevent the impact of the trauma. And after the session, activities that you may already do as hobbies, for example, like running, walking, like knitting or drumming, etc., can also help your left and your right side of your brain to work together and help the recovery. These are also very useful tips to use with your children and the families that you work with. There's also a website and a phone number that is shared on the screen for those who find this that's just popped up that you may find useful if it's this session is triggering to get some support. Children need safe and secure homes that are free from violence and free violence from harm and parents from the carers. They need their parents and carers that love and protect them when they find themselves into difficult situations. And home should be a place of like comfort, home and support. And unfortunately, for many children, home is not a place of safety, but an environment where they be witnessing like violent assaults or hearing like distressing sounds of violence. It's really important to know that for every person being abused, there is someone else responsible for this abuse, and that is the perpetrator. And all too often, children that are in the home and living with the impact of the abuse are often the forgotten victims of domestic abuse. And we're just going to take a look at some statistics to show you the impact of this. As 1 in 7 children, young people under the age of 18 will have lived with domestic violence at some point in their childhood. And there are 130,000 children in the UK living in homes with domestic abuse when there's a high risk of murder or serious harm. Nearly 2 in 3 children are exposed to domestic violence were also directly harmed, and children will suffer the multiple physical and mental health consequences because of this domestic violence. And between January 2005 and August 2015, 19 children and 2 women were killed by perpetrators of domestic abuse in circumstances, and this was relating to child contact. And additional statistics are that when children start primary school, there will be at least 1 child in every classroom that has lived with domestic abuse since they were born, and they've lived with domestic abuse for the whole of their young lives. And domestic abuse affects us all. It thrives on being behind closed doors. And we must make it everybody's business. Like the physical, mental, and the neurodevelopmental and behaviour effects of childhood exposure to domestic abuse are really well documented. And we will also look at these later on in the sessions. So it can affect children's cognitive development, and also it's important to add that the age, race, sex, culture will also have effect on the child's responses to the domestic abuse. It's really important to remember that children can witness domestic abuse in a variety of ways. For example, inside and outside the home. I'm often told by clients of whom I support that their children never witnessed or hear or see any of the domestic abuse within the home. But for those of you who've got young children, especially my children, they always see and hear things that I don't want them to see or hear. For example, if you whisper something to somebody else really quietly, especially my children, they've always got their flappy ears on and they always hear it. Does this sound familiar to anybody who's on this event today? Inside and outside the home. Oh, sorry, over the phone and on the internet and on social networking sites. Abuse is also known to give to give toys to the former or current partners and to the children, and these can have like activated spyware like installed in them, for example like Alexas and like tracking devices given in iPhones, etc. And this can monitor like the daily lives of the children and like the current partners. We've also known a case where a puppy was given to like the children and the former partner as a present at Christmas, and the puppy actually had a tracking device installed into it so that the abuser was able to track the family every time that they went out, so they knew the location when they were with the puppy at all times. And within the relationship, children are often used as spies within the relationship. And when the relationship has ended, for example, the abuser may have asked the children, like, where have you been? Who have you seen? Who's been within the family home? And like, who have you spoken to? And the children are often used as weapons as well. Like threats and promises from the abusive parent are often made, you know, for example, threats to harm the children, threats to stop like club fees, school fees, or to report the non-abusive parent like to agencies. And after the relationship has ended, through child contact and the court system, work with so many clients, and they always say that when the abuser was in the family home, they didn't bother with the child at all. But when they broke up, child access was the most important thing to them, and they continued to harass them and abuse them through the child court system and through agencies. They say to us they felt like they had no control over this. It's really important to add that a number of forms are being included in the upcoming domestic abuse bill around child contact and the court system. I also feel that it's really important to add about attachment theory and also about the abusive parent's ability to shape the children's perception of abuse. Because after an incident of domestic abuse, the person who's been abused may be like feeling really hurt, distressed, walking on eggshells, and the children may be at a very high state of stress. The abusive parent and the person who's abusive will present as like really happy, joking, and will be able to provide the children with attention. The parent who's been abused may be too scared to show the parent with any affection, and for the fear of the risk of escalation. And really important to note as well that they'll be using their survivor strategies to keep the children safe. The children, through the attachment theory, need the care and love from a parent after a traumatic experience, and they will often seek this from the abusive parent, as I just explained, that the non-abusive parent may not be emotionally present for the children. Agencies that become involved and speak to the children, through my experience, from my many years' experience of working with children and people who have been subjected to domestic abuse, may conclude that children are highly bonded to the abusive parent, and this is without examining the attachment theory. And it's really essential that all agencies that work with children are fully trained in domestic abuse, perpetrating behaviour, and, like I stated, the attachment theory. I'd like to draw your attention to that the impact of seeing or hearing domestic violence was recognised as children, young people being emotionally abused, and this was in line with the legislation and amendment in the Children's Act 1989. The impact of domestic abuse has a devastating impact on children, young people that can last into adulthood. And children can experience both short and long time cognitive and behaviour difficulties being exposed to domestic abuse. And children who are living with domestic violence can experience like lack of trust, anxiety. And this list, by a briefing by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, is not exhaustive, but you can see the impacts that domestic abuse can have on children. It's also really important to show you that children of any age can develop symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And from the previous list, it includes like this physical symptoms of like, can be like physical pains like headaches, tummy aches, and also like the flashbacks and nightmares. I'd like to just talk to you briefly about the protective factors, because protective factors can help to protect children for the adverse experiences and effects of being exposed to domestic abuse. So children who are able to like go to sort of like faith groups, like clubs, like Brownies, like Beavers, etc., sports clubs, or have a like positive educational relationship, educational sessions. This can be a really protective factor. Also having like role models outside the family home. This could be like an uncle, an aunt, etc. And this can also be a really protective factor. I'm just going to play the first video and just ask you to reflect from this video what the child in the video may be experiencing or hearing from what we've learned so far.
Do you think you're going to be working late again?
You come back here! Open the door, you... If you don't let me in right now,
Would you just like to just have a reflection for a moment and take a moment to think about the possible impacts on the child in the video hearing and living with domestic abuse? So are there always behaviour signs? I have seen Ryan Hart speak in live conferences, and something that's always stuck in my memory and I always think about when I work with children and young adults is this quote, which it says, where he's not drunk and beating us every weekend, we're not failing at school, and we don't have behaviour problems. These were the signs I was looking for, and because it hadn't happened, I had not recognised our suffering or that he was dangerous. To the outside world, we were just free, healthy, intelligent children. No one seemed concerned that we were doing so well. Sometimes the signs are not obvious that a child is living within an abusive relationship. And it's sad to note that Rook and Luke's Hart's father killed their mother Claire and their sister Charlotte in 2016 after years of coercion and control. And this leads me on to a discussion about different children's different coping strategies and their roles to abuse whilst living within domestic abuse households. And their different roles could be the problem child. So the problem child could be a child that may act up at home or in the community. They may be misdiagnosed with behaviour difficulties, and they may seek out attention in any form that they can. And the informer may seek approval of the abuser and is awarded for all the information shared on the other parent, etc. The informer may share accurate information, or even advice may be to be in favour of the abusive parent. The peacekeeper will try and calm the abuse, may try to come in between the altercations. They may feel responsible, guilty, and take the blame. They may become to feel they need to be the negotiator within the household. The copycat. They may copy the abusive parent. They may become abusive and violent to people within their lives and within the community. The scapegoat. They feel all the blame and the guilt. They feel responsible for the abuse, and they also may get told by the abusive parent that it's all their fault. They also may try to redirect the abuse onto themselves. And the invisible. The invisible is really withdrawn and really quiet. And they may try to make their body like really smaller, and they may try to stop being around the abusive parent. And the star pupil, they tend to excel at school. They try to make everyone happy. They seem to be unaffected by the abuse, and they try to win the abuser's approval. So when we look at this list of the children's coping strategies, the problem child, copycat, and the invisible may conform to our picture we may have in our mind when we think about children who are being affected by domestic abuse. But it's really important that we're all aware of all these behaviours, because as we saw from Luke and Ryan Hart's quotation, that the behaviour signs are not always obvious. We're going to look at some effects of domestic abuse at a variety of stages. I'm just going to draw your attention back to the true or false question at the beginning of the webinar. And the answer is true. An abusive parent can have an impact before a baby is born. As research has shown that even before a baby is born, an abusive parent, a father, can have an impact, because in cases when a newborn baby hears the abusive father's voice for the first time, the newborn baby will scream uncontrollably, and their eyes will roll with the whites of their eyes showing, like in distress, and it takes a long time to comfort them. I always feel that it's really important to remember that the point of conception may have a really big impact on the mother's emotional well-being. For example, the conception may have been really painful, may not have been their choice, and this can lead to difficulties with bonding with the baby later on. And statistics show that 30% of violence starts in pregnancy. And for the many women that I've worked with, have stated that when they became pregnant, this was a reason to fight back to the abuser to protect the unborn baby. And this has escalated the abuser's beliefs of power and entitlement. And this led to leading to isolation, like limited medical care, unable to sort of go and get their developmental checks, unable to buy nutritional food, maternity clothes, lack of support from agencies. And unfortunately, I have worked on many programs with clients whose children have been born prematurely. I've had stillbirths, like fetal damage, like from physical violence, and also like working with ladies that are using their coping strategies. Sorry, the sun keeps moving around. Their coping strategies of like using substances and even prescribed medication to deal with the impact of the domestic abuse, which can also lead to fetal damage. I also always like to look at the positives as well. So the positives of a lady leaving when they're pregnant is the mother can start to create a life free from abuse, start going to with safety planning, to the medical appointments, seek friends and family and community support, and they start to recover and start to reduce the toxic stress, the cortisol and adrenaline levels. The newborn, the toxic stress from the mother in pregnancy can lead to difficulties in the brain growth in the newborn. And the mother may be completely exhausted from meeting all the demands of the abuser and the newborn, whilst being isolated. And a tactic that I hear so many times is the abuser taking the car seat in the pushchair with them to work or when they go out, leaving them really further isolated within the home. The sexual controller may forbid them to breastfeed, again impeding the ability to bond with the newborn. They're told that they are unable to cuddle the baby, telling them they spoil them. And the mother may develop postnatal depression from being in an abusive relationship. And this leads to, research shows that this may lead to delays in expressive language. And again, like around like meetings with health professionals, professionals write that, the mother has not formed any attachments with the baby, but it's really important that we see the bigger picture within the domestic abuse and the reasons why this may have happened. And the positives are very similar to the newborn. But again, with like safety planning, the mother can start working with specialist agencies to get support around sort of safe childcare arrangements. Because leaving, especially with child contact, can be a point of escalation. I'm going to just look at a 6-year-old. A 6-year-old, there's an increased risk of injury. There's a increased risk of anxiety and fear. This leads to a lot of physical difficulty like stomach pains, headaches, asthma, allergies, and disturbed sleep patterns, etc. And studies show that domestic abuse has an impact on children's ability to focus and concentrate at school. And there's a study that shows that 40% of children who are living in domestic abuse households, their reading levels are below the national average. And most domestic abuse happens within the bedroom or at meal times. The children may become to associate food with times of stress and tension. And I've worked with many children that have like chewing or swallowing difficulties, or they may start to hoard food as they don't know when their safe mealtime will be next. And the positives of a 6-year-old, they have a lot of their rest of their life to recover from the domestic abuse. They're able to go to specialist services like the Children's Freedom Programme, the Adverse Childhood Experience Programmes, etc. Be able to go to build strong relationships with their peers and their non-abusive parents to start adjusting to their new life. we've got the teenager, young people that are growing up in families where very little is predictable or reliable. They may likely to have very much control over this or what happens to them. They may start to feel that the abuse is normalised. Around the age of the teenagers, they may start using their own coping strategies of drugs and alcohol or self-harm and start partaking in risk-taking behaviours. They may start be wanting to be out of the family home all the time, or they may do the opposite. They may be constantly worried about the parents subjected to abuse and their siblings, and they may be leading a very restrictive life, which can have an impact, a ripple effect on their overall life, of their relationship with peers and their education, etc. And the positives, they can connect with the non-abusive parent and can obtain all the support available to them, and hopefully they should start to feel safer, and they can start to learn about healthy and unhealthy relationships, and to learn that their growing up was not normal. And then a programme that myself and my colleagues deliver is the domestic abuse youth programme. So this is something that they could seek through the school. Disclosure. So if anybody, a child discloses to you about domestic abuse, it's really important to listen carefully to what they're saying. Let them know that they've done the right thing by telling you, and it's really important to let them know it's not their fault. You'll take them seriously. Never confront the alleged abuser. Explain to them what they'll do next to build up the trust and rapport. And there's you can get advice from the NSPCC, but always go to your safeguarding policies and procedures as well. Do children grow up to be abusers and victims? Well, this could be a whole webinar in itself, this topic. And I really believe in this Women Aid statement. I believe in empowering all the clients that I work with. This could be children, all men and ladies that I work with, and also about breaking the cycle as well with working with perpetrators. And I believe with children, it's good to empower them through the preventative programs and focusing on like the healthy relationships, the sexual stereotyping, the bullying, the conflict resolution, and the self-efficacy. And I feel this is really important, because if they've gone in thinking, well, because I'm a boy, the statistics know that I'm going to grow up to be a perpetrator, it's just building on the positives, and through education and knowledge and the empowerment, the preventative programs, I feel, is the way forward. And what can organisations do? I would just like to draw your attention really to unconscious bias. I mentioned previously about the domestic abuse youth programme. Myself and my colleague Rebecca Swain, last year we went into schools to deliver this programme to over 2,000 children. But this didn't come without barriers. And we have got told by many schools that there's no pupils within these schools that are subjected to domestic abuse. There's no domestic abuse issue within these barriers. We challenge these subjects, we challenge the unconscious bias, because as you're aware from the statistics of what we've learnt so far, domestic abuse is hidden behind closed doors, and the preventative programs are the way forward, and the training, knowledge and awareness. Also like to draw your attention to Operation on Compass. And I personally believe that all educational programs educational organisations like schools should be signed up to this, because this is where the police connects the schools, for example, to let them know that a domestic abuse, domestic violence incident has happened within the home, and then the schools can then find a specialist agency and support for that child. There's a variety of organisations and resources that you can signpost to. I'm personally trained on the Children's Freedom Programme and the Domestic Abuse Programme. As the DART programme is also available in Kent by Oasis, I believe. Child's Vision is based in Maidstone, and another amazing organisation that deliver the children's freedom. And the Adverse Child Who Experienced that I again am trained in and I deliver. And here's some further reading to raise your awareness about the effects of domestic abuse on children and young people. And I really highly recommend going onto this website and to the Bright Sky app, because if you type in the area that you're from, it will tell you where the specialist services are for and where you can find your areas for the specialist services for children, young people, of where you can signpost the children to that you're supporting. And thank you for listening. And then we'll go over to the questions.
So thank you, Tina, for your presentation. We do have a few questions that we're going to be putting through to you. So obviously there's been lots of questions about the slides and the information shared. This will be published and people will be able to access this after our session. Is there enough programs running educational wide for the children in schools, do you believe?
I feel that more can be done in schools. As I stated before, in West Kent, myself and my colleague last year were able to go out to do the Domestic Abuse Youth Programme, and this programme was written by Natalie Collins. And if anybody, I'm going to do a plug for Natalie Collins now, if anybody has a chance to do any of her training, I highly recommend it. And this year, obviously, because of COVID, I've been unable to do this, but we have a lot of resistance going into schools. And it needs to be mandatory on the government, whatever the word is. What's the word? Government curriculum. That's the word. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Tina. So from your learning, do child survivors experience greater or longer lasting effects due to one form of domestic abuse than others?
That's a really, really good question. And I have worked in the mental health field as well. And there's still the ripple effect for those who had lived in the domestic abuse household. But from my experience of working with those people, they never got the preventative programs or the specialist help. From my experience of working with the children, what they gain for it, they become the feedback from the schools and the other organisations. They say they're just more confident. The self-efficacy, the self-esteem, their confidence has built up. So they're just learning so much. And I don't think all forms of domestic abuse have an impact, but it's about getting that specialist service in and to build them, so they to remove the blame from them, and to allow them to be children, and most importantly to allow them to have their voice in a safe trauma-informed environment.
Thank you. So what age do you think then healthy relationship programs should be taught to children?
Well, I deliver the children's freedom programs from the age of 4 in a play therapy environment.
So from the age of 4, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So should children's groups be run as mixed sex or either male or female only? Are there advantages to doing it in a combined sex group?
Do you mean that by facilitators being male, or?
I would think it's the audience that you've got.
The audience. Now, I run them in mixed groups.
Mixed groups.
The reason being is because the children go to schools in mixed groups. When you go shopping, you're surrounded. The peer groups would be being, and you learn from the positives behaviour, like modelling from the behaviour from the other people in the group, and everybody's experiences are valued. And if we start sort of shielding people in, and then start giving that negative, like, the boys, could be, what's the word I'm trying to say? That the boys or the girls like home them in together. That doesn't make sense, does it? But I know what I mean in my mind. Yeah, it's a shared experience. It's trying to say it's all shared experience that boys and girls are both impacted. Yeah, I just had to get that from my brain to my mouth. Sorry, everybody.
That's fine. So do girls and boys get treated differently if they are brought up in a domestic abuse relationship, do you think? Or is it out there that it's known? I've
known that to happen through my experience. So, for example, if we got an abuser that has the tactic of the king of the castle, so that feels like the female's role is there to cook, to clean, and to look after them, they can inflict that onto their daughters. So that can happen within abusive relationships. Yeah, so that can have a different role onto children.
Brilliant. We've got a question about the youth programs. Are these accessible through schools, or do they have to be referred? Is there a process that has to be followed for it?
They are accessible through schools. You can come to ourselves at the Look Ahead to ask about the youth programs. I know my partnership agency, DAVS, the Domestic Abuse Volunteer Support Service, are currently taking referrals for their youth programs as well, and also Child Vision. They've got their website and they take referrals. So just go on to all your domestic abuse websites. Like I said, the app and the website, and go in, and it tells you about the referral pathway, because everybody does it completely different. But talk to your family liaison officer at schools. But for like myself, when I will go into schools and do the children's program, it's about building relationships and what's right for the child as well.
Okay, thank you. So does the youth group program teach about female perpetrators as well as male perpetrators? And does it cover coercive and controlling behaviour? It
covers all elements of domestic abuse, yes, and female perpetrators.
Thank you. I've got a question here. Do you know if there's anyone in Kent that's running the Children's Freedom Programme at the moment?
Yes, Child Vision, that is in Maidstone, DABS, the Domestic Abuse Volunteer Service, and at the top of my head, Social Services. They run quite a lot of programs for their clients. And to be perfectly honest with you, at the top of my head, I can't think of anybody else at the moment.
Thank you. Another question for you. Do abusers think about the impact they have upon their children? Is it normal for an abuser to favour one particular child who is more compliant?
Yeah, Mel, just going back to the other question, I completely forgot about an organisation that I work with, and if my boss is watching, she won't be very happy. Sevenoaks District Council, we run the Children's Freedom Programme every Friday, and in the evenings as well, the children's programme. So yes, they'll be looking to run that as well. And sorry, can you go to the next question that you just asked? Sorry,
I've just got to find it now.
Sorry, Mel. Under pressure, you see, I'm all over the place.
That's fine. So it was about, do the abusers think about the impact they have upon the children? Is it normal an abuser to favour one particular child who's more compliant?
Yes, it's an abusive tactic. It's especially when they start losing power and control. The abuser may start sort of favouring a child, so like giving them lots of gifts, lots of attention, start taking them for days out, and so start really favouring a specific child. So when the non-abusive parent is like started thinking about leaving, they get pressure from that child. They're going, no, but I really want to stay. I really want to stay. And that can cause a lot of tension and even divide. And we also got to think about the non-biological parent as well. So if there's like stepchildren, is that they can also be targeted as well within the family.
Thank you. Somebody's asking if how do we access play therapy for the younger children, and is this a free service?
Play therapy is normally accessed through social services early help. And they're also vegans. Look Ahead, we work closely with vegans, is based in Tunbridge Wells. Their information, I do believe, is on the slide, which you're going to have access to. And they do work in different boroughs as well. And I do believe they do on a means tested way, but it's very, very difficult to get play therapy free, because we're always accessing and trying to access support for children as cheap as we can.
Thank you. We've got a question around social media being a big thing at the moment. Do you think a campaign targeting youths and educating them that there are agencies out there to help if they are in a situation where domestic abuse is happening?
And I think all knowledge is power. So, yeah, I completely agree. But again, within our healthy relationships that we do with children, it covers all about media as well.
Thank you. So we have got a question to ask why we feel that schools are against going into the schools and obviously covering the domestic abuse and programs with the children. Why would you feel that that is a barrier and, you know, hard to get into?
I think it's lack of time of the curriculum is so fully jam-packed as well. And again, it's awareness of domestic abuse. And we've got to also think, like I stated, about their unconscious bias as well. And, you know, to get the statement that we've got no pupils with domestic abuse here, it's not a situation in the borough that we live. is what is their perception of domestic abuse. You know, does that child need to walk into that school with a black eye and bruises and stuff for them to, are they aware of emotional, psychological coercion, control? You know, it's more so to myself and my colleague, we're like, well, we need to get in there to deliver training to all the teachers, more awareness, so they're aware, you know. So we've just got to be aware of, you know, our unconscious bias, what are their perception of what domestic abuse is, and their training and awareness.
Thank you. We do have a question to ask whether children who have witnessed abuse and the effect on them has, you know, is it recognised enough? Are people supporting them enough?
It's getting better. It's getting a lot better. Like the domestic abuse bill, they're seeing children as victims of domestic abuse now. So it's like it's going forward. But there's a lot of work with a lot of agencies where the emphasis is on the person who's being subjected to abuse, sort of like parenting programs and everything else. And then we're trying to like, let's work in parallel, because research shows that if you got the support for the person who's being abused and for the children, and it all works in parallel, you get the best outcomes. So, and again, it's absolutely brilliant that within schools, you've got the schools counsellors and that, but it's also really, really important that they're specialists in domestic abuse as well, to know about all the impact about attachment theory and everything that the child might be going through as well. So got to have the specialist support for that child as well. And the adolescents, because we can't have a programme where you've got a 4-year-old and a 17-year-old. So it's got to be, there's specific programmes, and they're all run in the age groups for those children, like differentiated, age appropriate, and by, you know, trained professionals.
Thank you. We've also got a question about, in terms of educating children about abuse in relationships, how is it addressed with cultural issues in households where, say, for instance, the culture might assign greater power of authority to the male?
Oh, that's very good. That's a very good question. And that is all because it's all individual. So I'm just trying to move it. Because it's all individual and it's all covered in the programs. And if it's needed to, we would all do, you know, one-to-one sessions as well to meet the individual needs of the client, of the child.
So obviously it meets the needs of all the children. So would you have separate groups, or would they would all be together?
I think it would be all together to raise awareness, because again, it could be sort of hidden. So for example, from my experience, and we've also got to think like culturally about gypsy travellers and anything else. So from my experience of running programs, and it's just like when you run programs with women and men, you may have a child that expresses something, and then another child will go, oh, that's like me. And it's just that being that unity, and I'm not alone. So somebody expresses it, but then you would then take them out of the group. And if it felt like they needed individual work, but again, it's the individual child, and you differentiate the needs of the client, the child.
Thank you. So we do have a question about the domestic abuse bill change. So how does the domestic abuse bill change the focus on children as witnesses? Do you think this will change the service around children, for children?
I'm not an expert on the domestic abuse bill, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, but what I've read, seen, and the conferences I've been to is that the children have more of a voice, and then they're seen as, you know, the victims within their own right. They're not going to come under the category of the person who's been subjected to abuse. They're going to have their own category to make sure they get their own individual support.
Thank you. So on that one, Tina, that was our last question. So thank you ever so much for answering the questions and your presentation. We're going to hand back to Caroline now. Thank you. Just waiting for Caroline to join us.
Well, thank you so much, Tina. That was absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure something we will all be going away thinking about. Thanks to everyone who asked a question, because that really added to the conversation. A recording of the webinar will be made available to you shortly. If you did enjoy the event, please do note there's still time to register for the up and coming webinars, so your conference journey don't need to end here. You can go to www.daeverybodiesbusiness.org to register. We can also keep the conversation going with the hashtag #DAEverybodiesBusiness and hashtag #NoC-Speak-Out. Just want to finish on, if the talk today has raised anything with you personally and you'd like to find out more about the services available, please visit the website that you can see down in the bottom, www.domesticabuseservices.org.uk, where you can find out more about how to refer into your local services.